yazmışdı da sen lazım. Böyle Gəlir. Ben de işləyirəm. Mən də özüm işləyirəm. 1 2 1 2 1 1 1 1 1 hə gəlir. Gəlir. Problem yox. Gəlir. Mən də gəlir. 1 2 1 2 1 2 Mən də işləyirəm.
Well, good morning, everybody. Shall we start? Hello. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope. Yes? Okay. That's great. My name is Rui Gomes, and I'd like to apologize, first of all, for being a bit late in the start of this workshop. The bus took a bit longer than expected, but I'm very happy to have made it to the workshop at the end of the day, and very pleased to see you here. I work for the Council of Europe in the European Youth Center in Strasbourg, and I am in this context then in charge of a project which deals with, especially with hate speech in its online expression, and more generally with the role of young people in internet governance, especially in relation to citizenship matters related to the internet, the usage of the internet, and one could say, generally, broadly speaking, net citizenship. We have proposed this workshop to actually address and discuss together the relevance of hate speech online to young people, how it is perceived across the globe, across the internet world, in different regions of the world, and what could we learn from that in order to plan a youth campaign that we are organizing in the Council of Europe, but also to more generally to understand how should young people relate to the internet, and how could we support their relation to the internet in a way that supports human rights and democracy. So and now that then could be translated and carried forward in future internet governance strategies. So our aim in a nutshell is both addressing, combating hate speech online in relation to human rights, anti-discrimination, but it's also learning from this to see how could we better act to also support young people to be responsible citizens on the internet. I'm very pleased to have here with me a very distinguished panel of experts. I will introduce them now. I have Ala. Maybe you can introduce yourself first. Yes. Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ala Jarban. I'm from Yemen. I'm a young blogger and human rights activist. We mostly use the online world and media, social media, new media as a tool to advocate for human rights issues.
Good morning. My name is Maria Pascu. I am the chair of the Advisory Council on Youth, and I'm happy to present you the campaign that we are planning and discuss with you how we can better support it.
Good morning. I'm Nicola Douglas. I'm a young person from the UK, and I'm affiliated with ChildNet International as part of their Young People's Project.
Okay, I think we'll explore the issues with Ala and Nicole and then Maria, but I would like to invite all of you to take the floor and to also come in with your opinions, with your points of views, or with your questions regarding these issues, because our intention is really to have a workshop which is as participatory as possible. So, but I would like to start perhaps with inviting Ala to share with us how it is seen from Yemen and from the perspective of a young blogger, or an online activist for human rights and democracy, how it is perceived, the question of hate speech online. From your experience, what does it mean? How relevant is it as an issue?
First of all, I'd like to thank all the audience for coming. I know it's really difficult to attend an early session. It was also difficult for us to wake up. And at the same time, I'd like to thank Rui for the introduction. We agreed that internet governance and human rights should walk hand in hand together, especially when it comes to young people. I come from a country that went through the Arab Spring, and we actually started all the protests using the online world as a safe space for us to meet, organize, and mobilize. We started at the beginning of 2011. We did as a Facebook group. We called for protests to call for freedom of expression in its all forms, for human rights, for justice, for equality. And we used Facebook as a safe place for us to meet, to organize, since it was really difficult for us to meet in real life, as the government was targeting any of the activists. Facebook helped us a lot. Also, Twitter. We used blogging as well. Our first movement was because the government said that we will go out and we will destroy and we will sabotage. So we decided to actually call for protests and then cleaning the streets, which was very impressive. So many people joined us after, and they saw the peacefulness of our cause. The element of anonymity in the online world was very important to us as well. In our part of the world, especially with Arab Spring, we were very inspired by what happened in Tunisia and in Egypt as well. So this created an element of wonder, I'd call in philosophy, that maybe children still have it. I always compare it to a magic trick. When we, for example, taking a rabbit out of a hat, when we were kids, we would just be so amazed, so stunned by it. And then we start asking questions like how this happened. And youth in the Arab region and also in so many parts of the world started asking so many questions. And with questions came a very big issue, that's hate speech. Usually activists online who ask many questions face so many issues of hate speech. For instance, a female activist from my own country faced very bad kind of hate speech on the internet for being, for not, for example, wearing a scarf, for being with her hair. Many Islamist extremists also started pages calling her, in quotations, an infidel. Also, we witnessed so many Facebook pages that target marginalized groups in my country. For example, we have over 1 million Somalian refugees who come to my country. So recently we've witnessed a Facebook page that was started online calling for kicking them out of the country. And even the name they gave to them is in Arabic is akhdam, that means servers, or also as a synonym to slaves. And we witnessed so many cases like this recently in the online world. So the question is, how can we take responsibility when it comes to freedom of expression and hate speech online? And I think this question is raised to everyone. It's not anymore about what is the responsibility we should take, but also who is involved. I believe young people are a very important force in this society, and in any change happening in any place in the world, young people play a very important role. And thank you.
Thank you, Ala. So what you are saying is that the freedom of expression in the case of Yemen and this miracle that you talk about, this wonder, comes with also, or comes accompanied by then a kind of a backlash of hate speech or, in fact, abuse of people through the internet. In other words, using the same means that we use for freedom of expression is also used to perhaps curb freedom of expression or to intimidate people not to go online. Yeah? Is that what you're saying? Yes. I'd like to invite the audience also to perhaps put questions or comments to Allah before we move on to another panelist. I mean, I think specifically in relation to this issue of freedom of expression being accompanied by also freedom sometimes to abuse, and how that is perceived from maybe other experiences around the table. Yes, please.
Urban Parfentiev, Safer Internet Center, Russia. You mentioned that Facebook where you could be so no. No, okay. I'll begin from the very beginning. Urban Parfentiev, Safer Internet Center, Russia. You chosen Facebook for education and for activities in Facebook because Facebook is a safe place for you. It is absolutely okay if we talk about some other thing. What about government reaction for your activity? Because as I know, in most countries, the person can be prosecuted for actions that he did in social. For example, if we take Germany or Austria, the person can be prosecuted for Nazi propaganda in Facebook still. So can I understand the situation so that government did not react to the protest activities or would not react to it? Thank you.
That's a really good question. Thank you. Yes, the government would react differently to such movements on Facebook. Uh, Social media is a double-edged tool. To be honest, also this country, the hosting country of the IGF, does not also have a good record of human rights, and when it comes to activists on Facebook. I remember the case of one activist who's jailed, sentenced to 12 years just for starting a Facebook page, and his father was sacked out of his job with a company that's related to the government just for starting a Facebook page. In my country, in my own experience as well, many people, actually bloggers are still in jail now. We have part of the security is called political security, which is responsible for actually just arresting activists and human rights activists in the country. But I'm very optimistic because the situation has changed in my country now. After the Arab Spring, we have more freedom, and we're working on also having the needed freedom. We have to have equality, gender equality, women empowerment. But yes, the government used to, for example, in my country, they have a policy where they can know your IP address, and so many activists have been targeted and followed and kidnapped out of streets, and so many of them are still in prisons, and we're working so hard to get them out, and hopefully we will do soon.
Thank you, Ella. Other comments or questions, inputs from the room? I have one myself, perhaps. When you speak that, when you say that, for example, perhaps more Islamist or political movements or extremists when they target people online. Do you think it's an organized, let's say, approach or movement, or is it individual? Because I think that one of the questions that we face in our project, for example, is to find out the difference, if there is a difference, between what can be somehow individual reactions that maybe sometimes overreact or don't know how to react, and what is in fact the expression online of political movements that are actually active offline as well, if you see what I mean. How is it from your experience?
To answer your question, I think it's both. There is some kind of hate speech that is organized, and there is the individual. Sometimes people just provide their opinions on the online world, and not in an organized way, but they provide it in a way that can be called hate speech. But as well, there are organized movements such as the Islamist extremists. For example, in my country, who would they would use it to target female activists and calling them infidels, and then we would actually witness movements in the street, not only in the online world but also in the offline world. They would actually protest, calling for the practice of the Islamic Sharia, Islamic law, also to punish these activists who spoke freely using the online world.
Morning, everyone. Peter Matiasic from the European Youth Forum. A direct question to you all, about how do you, from your perspective and your experience, reconcile when you try to combat hate speech online with the freedom of expression and the situation in your country? So what is your basic value when it comes to combating hate speech? Do you focus on the protecting part, on securing that we avoid these circumstances when people are bullied online, or is it your first premise based on your experience? Is it more the freedom of expression? How do you reconcile that in your country? Because each country has its own debates on where to put the level. So what is it in Yemen, and from you? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I believe that the most important element in combating hate speech, especially from my country, is protection. Since the security of activists online is on the edge most of the times for things they would say. Also, freedom of expression is a very broad term. So actually, you cannot control what is on the internet. Maybe you can monitor sometimes, but most importantly is how to protect those who are activists in the online world, as well as also providing guidance, providing support for those who face such hate speech, organized campaigns on the online world.
Thank you. Other comments or questions to Allah? Maybe one to, before moving on with Nicole, maybe just one question. This, in Yemen, or in the linguistic background that you work in, does the notion of hate speech actually exist? I mean, as hate speech, or what will it be called? Does it exist in the law? Does it exist in... If you talk about this with colleagues, will you talk about abuse, or verbal abuse, or online abuse, or will you say actually this is hate speech, and will people recognize hate speech as something which is potentially also a criminal act?
Actually, there is absolutely no mention in the Yemeni law of hate speech, or even a specific law for the online environment and the internet. Maybe the only policy we have in internet is banning pornographic websites, which is also a way to ban other websites. Bloggers also have their websites blocked. And the term hate speech is not well known in our country. Maybe they would use the word bullying, cyberbullying, but people actually have different terms for hate speech. They also call it abuse when it comes when some of the activists get harassed, or some of them also get threats. So it's also verbal abuse as well. but the term hate speech itself is not very used in this part.
Yes, because I think that's one of the challenges that we also face in Europe. Even though in English it seems to be pretty clear when we speak about hate speech online, but when we move on to other linguistic contexts, sometimes people actually do not necessarily understand or immediately relate to what we refer to, and that's certainly one of the challenges that we face. But you touched upon cyberbullying, and cyberbullying is, for many of us, and especially for young people, perhaps the most visible face of or most visible side of the nasty face of the internet, if I can put it that way. I think we have seen in the recent weeks, and very recently actually, cases of young people being, harassed to the extreme of committing suicide, and I think this has been, it's something that anyone is, or everyone is, very concerned with and very worried with. And we would not say that necessarily cyberbullying is necessarily the core of hate speech, although it is one of the forms that it would assume, and especially for young people is perhaps the most visible part. I think we are pretty privileged to have with us Nicole Douglas from the Youth IGF project. I would like to invite her to share with us from her personal experience and also from your work in the Youth IGF project, how do you see this? I mean, do you actually are you actually afraid ever of going online, and are you confronted with hate speech online? Is it a problem really?
Do you know what? Coming as I do from the UK, hate speech in that sort of concentrated form that is seen by yourself, in that form where it is an outright sort of vindication of people's rights and a victimization of certain groups of people to such an extreme level, is not something I experience a lot, because from where I come from, that kind of hate speech is just not. It's not culturally. I don't think it's culturally accepted. It's not something that I see a lot of from my perspective. What I was quite aware of is this idea of cyberbullying and maybe a more general idea of hate discourse, which is a term that we talked about in summer camp a lot. And what we mean by this is this sort of general ambience, maybe a cultural acception of certain offensive views or opinions against particular groups of people, be that related to ethnicity, religion, even sometimes something as simple as hair color can make the difference, stereotypes based on that. And that kind of thing is something that I do experience a lot. I'm on forums such as Twitter and other chat boards, and I do see this kind of discussion going on, and it's not targeted. It's not to the level of inciting violence. It doesn't go beyond the bounds of freedom of expression, but it has definitely got an unpleasant tone to it. And what I feel is most unpleasant about it is sometimes how culturally accepted it is for this discussion to be going on. It's people don't see that it's such a negative thing because so many people tend to be talking about it, and so many people tend to be using certain terms, and yeah, it isn't organized like the kind of things that were going on in Yemen or with activists, because from my experience, young people in the UK just aren't that politically active. I mean, I'm 17 myself. I'm fairly politically active as it goes from my country, and that goes to the extent of supporting a particular political ideology, and that's about it. So, it's nothing like your experience, but from where I stand, this sort of general hate discourse is the more common form. It's not targeted, but it's still just as potent because of the way it's so culturally accepted. And that's what scares me more, is this idea that, it's easy, maybe slightly easier to combat hate speech that comes from a definite source, but it's more difficult to combat it when it comes from a source that's so general and accepted. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touched upon two very important points. Is the fact that you don't necessarily associate it with one source that you could perhaps, let's say, counter or seek to address. And I think the question that the other point is that it has become so generalized, so common, as almost a normal form of expression. I mean, we are in an audience which is fairly useful, I will say. And I would like to move on a little bit to the question of, is there something we can do, and if so, what should it be in first place? Did you discuss that in your forum meeting? Thank you. If you could share that with us, I think it would be a good starting point.
Well, this is something we definitely discussed. In summer camp, we went through this particular workshop, and we had a look at the ideas behind it and the sort of things that were coming out of it. And there were two ways that we definitely identified as being particularly effective in combating this. There's education and denouncement, which were mentioned in the sort of workshop's briefing notes. So personally, like, just from the initial thing, I agree more with education as a method of combating this hate discourse. Because from what I talked about in workshops yesterday, in our workshop in particular, was that this idea of people becoming more self-aware of what they're putting online, and educating people in schools, from internet service providers, from parents, from civil societies, just this general education of young people in my country to be a lot more aware of the content they're putting online and the effect it's having on other people. So yeah, education, that's the sort of main method that I would go for. Obviously there are limitations to this because in schools they don't have that kind of funding, and it isn't a very global approach because there are schools which where technology isn't that widely available. I don't know about the situation in Yemen in particular, but I can imagine that kind of thing would just it's not something the government are going to fund, the idea behind teaching young people how to use the internet. But this other idea of denouncement is a particular one. I believe it's the Speak No Hate campaign, which I was particularly interested in, because although education is a good starting point, I think that sometimes when you're on these online forums, you don't have that legislative power to monitor what's going on the internet. And I think this community-based response is possibly a more effective way of sort of controlling, policing what goes online. If to use a certain example, in the Olympics, when it was going on in London, there were comments made on Twitter about the diver Tom Daley. And these were, I don't know if anyone's familiar with this particular example, but the Twitter reaction to what was said was a general sort of uprising against this particular person who was making these comments, on a community-based response. No, obviously there was no hashtags involved or anything, but this general community policing is somewhat better because the community itself is defining what is and isn't acceptable online, which is far more I think it's a better approach to have it coming from the people who are using the platform, rather than to have the people designing the platform who might not necessarily be aware of which way they want this sort of acceptance to go. So yeah, denouncement definitely. I mean, I think there are certain limitations to it. Young people, I don't know myself. I think I would use a hashtag. There are definitely cases I can think of, Twitter tweets that I see myself from my peer group, where I would say, look, stop now. Especially religious discussion goes on quite a bit at our school. Atheists on Christians is a big one that I experience a lot, and obviously that's just from my perspective. And I think that this kind of thing is the bit where I would be saying, look, stop. What you're saying to me is not something that you should be saying, because you're being right offensive. Like the kind of comments they're coming out with is what they see as acceptable is just not something that they should be saying. It is within freedom of expression, I suppose, in a way, but it is this kind of hate discourse, and a community response to this kind of thing would be far more beneficial, I think.
Thank you. But that, of course, implies that the community has people that feel able and are capable of reacting and perhaps of proposing some moderation. I have a speaker there. Can you please introduce yourself?
Is it on? Okay. Hi, my name is Kate. I'm from UNICEF, but this is not really related so much to my work, but more my experience of growing up in South Africa and the way Twitter is used there. And we've had a lot of similar cases of people saying things which the Twitter community reacted to very badly, particularly around racial issues, but it had those real world repercussions as well. So that you had the community response, and a very strong one, but then also the offline response of people actually reporting these cases to the Human Rights Commission, and that course being taken further. So it's an interesting comparison. I think a country like South Africa has a lot of good examples or interesting examples to learn about how hate speech online then gets handled offline as well.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, one of the challenges that we face, and one of the reasons that also leads us to, or has led us to start this project, is the continuum between the online and the offline. And our assumption is that we should have somehow online human relations should be guided by the same principles that are guided offline. And the question is how to promote that. And I think that Nicole mentioned precisely this question of denouncement. I think that's one of the ways you mentioned, Kate, making use of existing legal mechanisms for protection of human rights, for example, or for combating racial discourse or discrimination. I think it will be interesting to maybe pick up from other people across the table of other examples of what may work, what may be already existing in your environment or country, or what may not be existing and should perhaps exist. I'd like to invite the participants in the workshop to take the floor and perhaps share also their points of view on this, if you'd like to. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Ludo Keizer, and I'm here as an independent. Well, actually, what I do, I trigger organizations, and I help CEOs, and I help youth organizations. So I'm kind of in a schizophrenic position many times. Actually, what I wanted to address, and it's not something that I have directly the solution for or something. It was just something that grabbed my attention very much when it comes to this topic the last couple of weeks. I was monitoring what happened in France with the, I think the hashtag was Good Jew, which was being used, and it was being taken down. And actually, I sort of had a problem with those things being taken down. And I mean, I recognize all the bullying and the troubles that might be coming from these type of expressions. But at the same time, I was wondering, okay, so let's say those hashtags were being used for a little less influential group, let's say the Roma, for example, in Europe. I would wonder if the Roma would have the same potential as, in this case, the Jewish community had to get a hashtag taken down like that. And to me, that was kind of a, it was triggering me, and I would like to hear your perspective on that, actually, because obviously some cultural or religious communities have a very strong background and a very strong political case, basically, while other cultural or religious groups might not have that. And then I see actually, a divide in how hate speech is being treated. Do you have an opinion on that? Actually, this is to anyone in the panel or the public who wants to speak up on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd rather invite the public before giving our opinion. I think of Martin.
Hello, I'm Martin. I'm here with the Web of Tomorrow is Yours, which is a youth side event to IGF, and we try to bring youngsters like also Ludo to these events, and especially now to IGF. I have a bit of mixed feelings about the community responses. You had earlier the examples of South Africa. And I felt that the backlash against especially the public actors was incredibly huge. I mean, then it was an individual that was faced itself with cyberbullying and the stuff that we usually try to combat and try to avoid. To a certain extent, I think that a community response certainly is necessary, is a very good thing. But when it comes to, you also spoke of personal backlashes, I heard of assaults in certain cases in the physical world. I mean, that goes, in my eyes, too far. So in a way, we also need to be careful with what we ask from people. I mean, when we say promote the hashtag, and I mean, that also invites after a while to abuse. If people are being abusive with the hashtag, yeah. I'm just a bit worried of just building on community response without any kind of moderation where it might lead us. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe other speakers want to pick up on this opinion, or yeah, in the back.
Thanks very much. Is this working? Okay. I'm Matthew Jackman. I'm also here with ChildNet, and I'm here to. I was listening quite closely to what Nicola had to say about the community response, and I kind of had a few views on that. And as was mentioned over there, you know, the community reacts to some cases, and some people get what they want out of the reaction. But can we rely on the community all the time? You know, we'd like to think that the community is always right and it's always looking for the best in people. But, you know, the community is full of different people. The internet is full of various different people looking for different things and wanting to say different things and get different things out of the internet. So how can the community always be right? So, you know, there's not kind of one rule for everyone as such. You know, it varies from issue to issue, from scale, you know, the size. I mean, if I was being attacked by maybe one person with hate speech and there wasn't a community response, would I have the same, you know, do I have this kind of same response as, you know, Tom Daly does, as Nicola mentioned, with millions of people? So I would like to kind of ask the question, you know, is there kind of one rule for everyone? Is the community the right place to look as such?
Thank you. Other comments? No, so we're left with these two questions, in fact, which I think are very much related, is the community the best way to react to this, and will communities react the same way to all cases? We tend to say that the fight against hate speech, in whatever form it takes, should be grounded on a human rights approach. So in the respect of human dignity of everyone, which leads us then to the question, if we connect the online and the offline dimensions, that, let's face it, in the offline world, human rights are also not always totally respected in the same way by everyone, and there are, of course, at least speaking from our experiences across Europe, there are groups which are more likely to be targets of hate speech offline and online, and abuse, and sometimes also physical violence. So in that respect, one could probably argue that the internet in this way, I think, mirrors fairly well the rest of society. But then again, we're also not necessarily always happy with the human rights record in our societies. So if we act towards a better human rights record offline, then we still have to do it online as well. That will be our starting point. Of course, it does not, I think, reply necessarily to the questions, to specificities of online hate speech, in the sense that it is immediate, in the sense that sometimes it can also be very invisible. It's both public in a way, but it can also be very personally targeted, which is perhaps in some cases more difficult to react to. And if I think, for example, as Ludo mentioned the question of the Roma, of course, if you don't have either Roma activists or people who are aware of the situation of Roma to react, there may not be so much reaction, and that is a question. And then, of course, the original point, which was, so how do you, if we have moderators of any kind, what I say, people who take the initiative, how are these people supported in a way? Or do we just count on the common sense of the global internet community to say that, to hope that somebody is going to react and say, hey, come on, this is stupid, and by then everything will be settled? I'm not sure that we can be so optimistic, even though a good dose of optimism is always welcome in these matters. Nicole, I see that you want to add something to this, please.
I'm probably at the risk of sounding really idealist. Okay, I like the idea of community response, and I totally acknowledge all the limitations that have come up with it. I think there is a place for it, though, and maybe it does go hand in hand with other forms of response, be that moderation or possibly legislation. This idea that the online and the offline, or that the online should be a reflection of the offline, and that we have this mirror image of the acceptance of human rights and basic dignity for other people, I think is really, really important. Freedom of expression, at the end of the day, it ends where someone else's freedom from hate begins. So I can say what I like up to the point where I begin to violate someone else's rights. But who draws the line between where I am violating someone else's rights? Is it the person themselves? Is it a community? As you say with the Roma, they are marginalized to an extent in that they maybe don't have the same access to same access to these kind of forums that the Jewish community might have. I'm not totally familiar with the situation with that particular hashtag, but I can imagine that were something to come up against the Roma, that it wouldn't be viewed in the same way. And I think the point you made was incredibly valid, in the sort of the Jewish community maybe do have a bit more pushing power there to get these hashtags taken down. And it seems to me like if freedom of expression is something that we value is very important, where can we say that we are allowed to take these hashtags down? Because if we are doing this, then are we not violating someone else's freedom to express these views? Which is a dangerous thing to say, and it's probably an unpopular thing to say. I do believe in a free internet. I believe that people should be able to say what they like, and I do struggle with the idea of where this ends. I am only 17. I apologize for that, and maybe as I grow up I will get some clearer ideas of exactly where these lines should be drawn. And I'm still experiencing the internet for myself, and on the various forums that I participate in, I understand that these things are complicated issues that not many people understand. So as a general rule, I see that there should be a community response, although it is so limited in that, as people have mentioned, there are huge limitations to it because there isn't a general consensus. And if there is a general consensus, can we trust it? Because people come from so many different backgrounds. So maybe there is a place for moderation as well. And again, limitations to moderation. But there maybe these two hand in hand can help to sort out this problem a bit. Thanks.
I have Allah, and then I think Kate. Yeah.
I absolutely understand your point, Nicola. Being also a young person, I'm 22 years old, I'm still also experiencing the internet. And truth is, the whole world is still experiencing the internet, and things are changing rapidly. So as a young person, let me be optimistic, Rui, and as a realistic person, I will also be pessimistic a little bit. I think the world is so much connected right now. To reply to your point, that for example, in Europe, you have the Roma minorities. Also in my country, we have the Jewish minorities. And the truth is, they don't have to have a Roma activist so they can present their cases, also work for their rights as well. For example, in my country, it's an Islamic country, but many are also working for the rights of the Jewish minorities. I also get bullied a little bit about being pro-feminist movement in my country, so also males can also support the rights of women. And it's also a double-edged sword again, because the community also have different responses. For example, we have the movement against the U.S. strike drones in my country, because it kills many civilians. It also targets terrorists. But there is a community agreement that the strike drones are necessary, regardless of the civilians who die. So when we stand for causes like this, for civilians, we also face some kind of resistance from the community itself.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the point that I don't think there is an easy answer, and from country to country it really differs, and from the cultural context. I mean, to pick up on the South Africa example again, aside from the cases that the gentleman over there mentioned, where it was individuals saying things, there have also been cases where people have put up videos which were then considered offensive by certain minorities in the country, and everyone was really encouraged to take this to the Chapter 9 institutions in the country, who do have kind of this legal mandate in the country and are a more objective source to try and decide whether something has crossed the line from free speech to being offensive and infringing on the rights of others. But there aren't easy answers, and a lot of them have drawn those kind of arguments, well, is this crossing the line? But I think in South Africa people are very sensitive to the rights of others to dignity and to respect culturally and ethnically and racially because of the history of the country. So in certain cases, things which in other countries might not have been removed would be removed because that's the context that we live in.
Thank you. I think you point the finger to a very important dimension, which is the need to take into account the local, national or cultural context. And we see also in Europe that there are countries where some types of content are taken out, and other countries where it's, it's freedom is freedom is freedom, point. And I think even the case of the hashtag that was referred to in France, I think I also interpret it as partly related to that. There is a history to that, and I think that history weighs heavily on people's minds, and maybe makes people react stronger to some issues than to others. Nonetheless, I tend to say that, and to agree with Allah, that at the end of the day, if we stand up for the rights of some people, we should be able to stand up for the rights of everyone. And I think that somehow should be could be the main idea. It doesn't sort the question of should we ban sites or not. It's not also, as we'll see in a minute, what we are working towards. But I think that's the kind of measures that the people in charge of politics and in charge of legal measures should address. We are looking more into the education side, but ultimately it has also to find its way into the legislative world. Ludo, I see you standing up. Is it because you would like to take...
Yeah, I would like to say one more thing. To me personally, I draw the line at physical violence, and I think the Yemen example, shows that very much, when people take it to the street and really assault people. To me, that's the line. I do want to mention that I would hope in a session, especially where a lot of youth is involved, that we maybe can stop a little bit by talking about online and offline, because basically it is the same thing, and we need to realize that. The book Mein Kampf was for a long time not allowed to be read by Dutch people, actually. And now that discussion is starting to open up again, and they say, okay, it's a book, and maybe we should be able to read it. There's probably a lot of hate speech in the book, but we can learn from that and we can empower ourselves with that, basically. And if we just are not able to read the book, it's not accessible, then that will never be like an empowerment factor in that whole process. You know, I hope actually that we can look in this discussion, and furthermore tomorrow as well, when it comes to youth discussions as well, you know, let's forget a little bit about online and offline, because otherwise it will be a weird discourse that the Mein Kampf book would be allowed again, but then again we are going to take down some hashtags. I mean, to me that is just, I feel like I'm living in like again, like a schizophrenic world almost, you know. The book is going to be allowed, but the hashtag not. Come on now. Yeah, that's my personal opinion. Maybe you have a reaction on that, maybe not. I just wanted to express it. Thank you.
Well, you did very well and very convincingly, I will say. Nicole, you want to say something to this?
Hey, yeah, I understand where you come from when you say the online offline world. There does seem to be a total contradiction in terms there, that this hashtag is banned online and Mein Kampf allowed offline. And I did like the idea that by reading this book, people can empower themselves. I was quite taken with that we educate ourselves through this kind of content. I would say, however, that not all young people do hold with the idea that the online and offline world are the same thing. I myself see a balance between the two. I think that they merge in certain places, but I think people act differently online to how they do in the offline world. I think in some contexts, you can agree with me, you can disagree, but there are ways in which earlier Ella mentioned anonymity, that on the online world is a much more poignant thing than offline. You can't really be anonymous to the same degree you can in the offline world as you can online. And I think there are slightly separations in every situation that I'm in, and I take this possibly for most people too. If you are with your friends, you may act differently to how you are with your parents, or how you're with your teachers. I take this from a young person's perspective, obviously, and we act differently depending on who we're with. And I think the same is true for how we act online and offline, in that the online is just a different space. It's like school or like friends, and it's online. And I think that I do possibly act slightly differently. I know some of my peers do, in that they appear more polished, because we lose some of the depth online that we do in the offline world. For example, communication, you know, body language, tone, that kind of thing is completely lost online to some degree, and I think that's an important distinction to make, that there is a gap between online and offline. They aren't completely similar, but to return to your original point, there is a contradiction with this idea that the hashtag is banned but Mein Kampf is allowed, and I think that is an important thing to address. But I wouldn't say that the two worlds are completely merged as yet. They're becoming that way, maybe growing closer with the advancement of mobile communication, meaning that we're constantly linked, but I think there's still a bit way to go before we can see them as the same world.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Veronica Donoso. I'm here representing the YouKids Online. Is it working? Yeah, okay. But now I'm just gonna talk as Chilean. I'm from Chile, which is in Latin America. A discussion that's been very much absent from the forum. I get the feeling almost no representatives from our continent. I was just wondering about something else. I think, yeah, in terms of hate speech, I think a wave of discussion I've heard so far concentrates a lot on the imbalance of power relationships, like looking at the responsibility of society when you have a group that it's being looked down upon, or that it's being marginalized, and that we all assume, okay, society has a role to play there. We should protect the ones who are vulnerable. But what happens when hate speech doesn't involve imbalance of power? And I think that's very challenging, because then we don't talk about human rights. We don't have legislations about that. And I just want to present a case which is very typical in Latin America, especially in South America, where many football fanatics. And you have the barras bravas, sort of hooligans there. And you have lots of exchanges on Facebook, on social networking sites, on Twitter, where people who are more or less at the same, who are peers, who share the same level of power among themselves, and then you see lots of hate speech. So you have the exchange among the people, but you also have other people who are not involved, who are also being confronted with hate speech. So I think that's also very challenging, because then we tend to think, well, it's not our problem. We don't get involved in these cases. And I think it's an important issue to raise when we talk about hate speech, because it's other community, it's also a community issue, but sometimes people say, okay, I don't care, I don't get involved, and then the level of acceptance of hate speech grows. So I think then it makes it even more challenging for education, for prevention, because then you have people like getting used to people mistreating each other. And then you have this also in other kinds of media. So like you have fans from one team, like or from Argentina against Chile or Brazil, or even within the country, and that comes to other very normal situations. So I think that's also, there's not much attention when we get to that level, and I think it's at the level of what should we do about that? I just wonder. I mean, it's so difficult when it comes to how we defend people's rights, when it doesn't look like a human right. I'm like, okay, well, you talk about football, but then you're offending someone terribly, or football player or something. So, and young people get used to it. So I do feel that in Latin America, people get much more violent in terms of, and the level of acceptance of violence grows a lot. So I don't know if people have ideas or just comments on that, which goes beyond serious issues like political, of minorities, or vulnerable groups of society.
Thank you, Veronica, for bringing in this perspective, which I think is indeed very important. I myself experience that quite often, and I tend to take it very lightly and say, well, this is football. I mean, it's like almost as if you cannot rationalize these things anyway. But but there is indeed, I think, a potential continuum of, you know, if you tolerate it here, why not tolerate it there, or the other way around? Yeah. Thanks for bringing the point. Again, I invite the audience, since we're coming into football, perhaps it's easier to connect now, to comment. You also have an example, Lala. Okay, first we have, sorry, I forgot your name. Martin, no?
Matthew.
Matthew, yes, Matthew. And then the gentleman there, and then Allah. Okay, thank you.
I think it's very interesting there when you mentioned the word acceptance, and how, you know, things, or people have to accept that in some cases hate speech is going to happen, and, you know, we shouldn't kind of fear this. I think there's been you know, things need to be said, as Ada was saying, you know, activists, things need to be, you know, said. Freedom of expression has to be expressed. I think there's a slight contradiction. We try to promote freedom of expression. We have workshops here which are talking all about how we can say what we want to say within the limits, but then how to express freedom of expression, but then reduce, you know, try and reduce hate speech. I think the question I'd like to kind of ask here is how do we teach this? How do we get that balance right? Because it's, as we've, you know, seen here, the kind of varying cultures and what is acceptable in different circumstances, whether it be football, whether it be religious groups. How is this taught within schools? How are young people going to understand the difference in across you know, continents? I think it's very interesting what you said there about how the online world and the offline world, you know, there's no difference. I personally think there is a difference. There are things you can do online which are just, you know, you can't do, you know, in the real world. You can't connect to large audiences as you can on the internet. You can't be as anonymous as Nicola said. So I think, you know, it's interesting to see how we teach this, how we kind of become the citizens online, which we need to kind of express freely but reduce hate speech.
Okay, thank you. I have the gentleman there. Yeah.
you. Hi, my name is Thiago Tavares. I'm from SaferNet in Brazil, which is the organization responsible for the Brazilian Safer Internet Center. And I would like to share some comments regarding our situation in Brazil, because we are also responsible for the Brazilian National Cybercrime Reporting Center. And regarding racism and neo-Nazi websites, we collect reports, public reports, regarding those kinds of crimes. And on the last 6 years and 9 months, we received, for example, 34,816 URLs was reported in Brazil regarding pages suspects of racism. And about neo-Nazi websites, we received 20,600 reports regarding neo-Nazi websites. So it's a large amount of reports regarding racism and neo-Nazi suspect contents. And in Brazil, our experience proves that the youth people, the youth generation, is the main target of these neo-Nazi cells. The Brazilian Federal Police mapping over the last 4 or 5 years around 300 different neo-Nazi cells in the country. And those cells, the majority of those cells targeting young people to between 15 and 20 years old, to help them to spread neo-Nazi content and also discrimination and racism messages, especially on the social networking sites. And of course, I would like to share these figures and put on these issues and these figures on the floor to discuss, because it's a very serious scenario, and that we need to try to find solutions to not only to prevent, especially to prevent those situations, but also to use of the law enforcement to stop this kind of crime. Thanks.
Yeah, can I can I just ask for one clarification? The reports, are they made by the public? Is it by public institutions or by the public? Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Just wanted to mention the football example that you mentioned. Obviously, there's been a lot of hate speech, if you want to call it like that, in the stadium for a long time, and we had the banners on the fight against racism on the pitch for a long time. We still have that. So that has been there online and offline at the same time. And as Matthew mentioned, online and offline might be a little different. It came from your report as well, huh? That about 40% said it was different, and about the other 40% said they acted about the same. I think those were the numbers. And connecting that to the last piece that the gentleman mentioned over here, I think it's pretty awesome actually that the neo-Nazi websites are there, because I'm really scared if there are neo-Nazi groups in the basement and I cannot see anything. But when they have a website, at least we see a little bit what's out there, and we can get into communication with them. So basically, I like hate speech to be online, because at least we can talk about it then, and especially with the football as well. If it happens in the stadium one time, it has the same type of influence on the young people there, young people on the streets. But it's a one-time thing there, and it's hard to control. But when it's online, then we can have a discussion about it, we can talk about it, and we can monitor it as a community. So honestly, I'm quite happy actually that that it happens online, and obviously, you know, we still need to work on it because it takes some time to get grip on it. But you know, let's be positive in that sense, you know, and be happy that the stuff is getting out there so we can address it and we can, you know, talk to the people. That's all I want to say, you know. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ludo. I think you made your point. Allah, you wanted to say something on this as well?
Well, the topic of the football was really important for me because in our region, it was it reached to a point where it was very serious. There was a game between Egypt and Nigeria, and so there was a home game and there's an away game, and then social media, especially on Facebook, the fans of the two teams started offending each other in a very bad way, and then clashes happened in Egypt, clashes happened in Algeria, so they had to do the third game in Sudan. And because the talk, the hate speech between the two teams got so big, fans actually traveled to Sudan from both countries, and then they started fighting in the stadium of in the capital of Sudan, Khartoum, and many people died because of that. Tens of people died, hundreds of people injured, in a country that's also far away from the both countries. So it is really important to practice these values of human rights, not only in online, offline terms, but also in our normal practices during the day in football and all different fields, not only politics, for example.
Thank you. Now I still have three more people. I have the gentleman there with the glasses, and then the lady with the microphone, and then here, and then I think Tamara. Okay.
Okay, thanks for giving me the speech. I'm Eric Creer. I'm coming from the National Youth Service in Luxembourg, and I'm representing here today the InSafe network. Actually, I wanted to comment on all those offline-online discussions. What we discovered in Luxembourg is that we have the same problem, that of course there's a distinction between online and offline, but the main topics behind are always the same. Actually, what we already are doing right now is that since September we are running a campaign about fighting against cyberbullying. So we do this campaign at schools, but also at many public events where young people are gathering. And what we really try to do at the moment, and we had support by the local university, is that one of the main issues that we try to target in Luxembourg is that we don't just talk to the ones who are the target of bullying or who are the origin of the bullying. We also really try to address the ones who witness the bullying, and really try to emphasize that they are the people who have to stand up, who have to do something. Okay, we don't have a challenge to do a Western European Spring at the moment in Luxembourg, so we are really talking about much less tough things, but still, even if it's about seeing that somebody is bullied at school or in the leisure time, young people, but also we as an adult, we always hesitate. Should I step in, should I interfere, or should I just say, well, that's their business? Another last comment that I want to say is that it's very difficult also to tell, because we work a lot with young people, where to put the borderline. As we said, is it when then the physical violence starts, or is it when we write about already physical action, or even just before even we type about physical action? This borderline is very difficult to find, and we had an interesting also comment yesterday already in other workshops where it was about the freedom of expression. Where does this end? How far can we go? And what I took as a conclusion a little bit from that discussion is that we really also have to watch ourselves and to see the context of it. An example, how many of us did heard somebody already in the bus shuttle coming here or in the bus shuttle leaving from here doing comments about the organization of this event? And I really want to thank all the other people who put a lot of effort in this event. It's a huge event. I heard that it's now more than 1,500 people coming over here. And of course, so nothing can be perfect, but still we do comments which are sometimes on the edge of, well, how far can you go about yeah, after all they are hosting us. So it really shows that it's very difficult to really, you know, put yourself out as a third observer, because sometimes even the ones, you know, working here against all those cyber crimes, then suddenly they are also witnessing that themselves, they, you know, can be touched about it, and it's emotional. So it's like this football thing. Yeah, if you're also very much into football, you might sometimes insult somebody. So let's not forget that it's very difficult. I think that's a bit also what you were mentioning over there about We need to see some hate speech online or offline even, because then we can even talk about it and where to put the border. So I have two questions if anybody wants to react later after the panel even and come up towards me. If you do similar campaigns in your countries, please come up. We can exchange the contact details that we can exchange then the practice. I would really like to share more about what we are doing and what you are doing. And then second, of course, and maybe that's then some more feedback from the round today, the question of where to put the border. When do you need start acting? And when you need to say, stop, that's now the line where you start hurting the other one. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I thank you. Okay, Ludi, please.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to what Thiago said from Brazil, because I think we need to understand that there is a difference if the hate speech comes from a neo-Nazi cell, or if it's just between some people being online, because this is kind of an infiltration of the young people, and if they just get the idea that it's only between some of them that talking about maybe racism or something like that, and you don't understand that there is an organization behind it that tries to infiltrate your opinion, then it makes a difference. And if you see, I totally agree. If you have a website, a neo-Nazi website, then you know your enemy and you can address it, and you see what they are writing there. But if it's going through the social networking sites where you just get the impression it might be a personal opinion of some people or some smaller group, then you don't understand that there is a huge organization behind it that tries to disseminate their ideas and their racist content and widespread it. And therefore I really think it's really important that young people understand when there is a group behind it, an organized group that tries to do this dissemination, or whether it's only communication between each other and exchange of views. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Burrell. I work for the Council of Europe in the Children's Rights Division. I address issues relating to the child protection online and also the empowerment of children. What I would like to say is that I think the debate concerning freedom of expression versus hate speech is a never-ending debate, and it's been ongoing since we have our International Convention on Human Rights. Now it's what is really different between the online and offline is the accessibility and availability of content, and we've got to take into account the fact that we have individual sensitivities and vulnerabilities which are more exposed to violent contents, and that what makes the difference. I think the response should be multi-stakeholder. I think we have to remember why we're here. That is also the difference with the online approach. It's having a dialogue between policymakers, the technical, academic, researching communities, to try to find ways of responding and also ensuring that we can have easy ways of denouncing, like we have easy ways of speaking out online.
Thank you, Stephanie. Veronica, please brief, because Tamara also wants to say something. We also would like to invite 4 comments, maybe from the remote panelists, and I would also want to give the floor to Maria, who has been very patiently waiting.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's important that we also, as Matthew pointed out and other people here, that we also focus on the how we're going to deal with it. And I think in order to do that, it's also important to get informed about actual research. Like, for instance, the research we have more at hand would be research on cyberbullying, how to prevent it, and what kinds of interventions work. Basically, I think it's very risky. There are many policies, many initiatives that are taken that are not based on actual research. So sometimes we think like we have, okay, one campaign against hate speech might have an effect and might not necessarily do, because many times, and I think one of the huge problems is that there is some money, not much, unfortunately, and in many safer internet centers in many countries and many governments invest some money in raising awareness, but not necessarily in having interventions that really have an impact on behavioral change of people. So when you come to cyberbullying research, you see that there are the most effective types of initiatives are the ones that are called whole school approaches, which actually involve the whole community. And by involving the whole community, it also means parents, it means communities outside schools, and it means not just one-shot campaign to talk about hate speech or put just a banner on a stadium, but it's actually dealing with policies that even the students develop at their own schools. So I think it's important to look into existing research, but also to invest some money so that academics can actually do research on the effectiveness of which actual policies and which kinds of initiatives should be taken. So I know there are some initiatives now, people developing serious games. There are all kinds of research being done. There's a cost action on cyberbullying, actually. So it might be interesting to look into that and to inform policy about what actually works so that they invest money in projects that will have an impact on changing the behavior of people rather than just making us all talk about it without any practical solution. That's all.
Thank you, Veronica. Then Tamara.
Hello, my name is Tamara Gojkovic. I come from Youth for Exchange and Understanding. And I would just like to point out that I think that it's very important to think about who are we, because our identities are constructed, and basically we all need to accept certain social values to be accepted offline and online. So my point would be, when it comes to this discussion, is our two worlds merged, offline and online worlds? Because I think that many people actually are one person offline and another online. So I think it is also very important to tackle this issue, because when we go from the beginning and say, who am I, and am I Tamara offline or am I Tamara online? Who is the real me? You know, I think that it also should be very important when we are discussing hate speech, because things that you will say online, you will never say offline.
Yeah, in our work recently, we came across an experience in which young people, students in this case, were actually had their comments that they had posted online read over on the radio, and it sounded really, really weird, because then they realized how stupid perhaps it was. Thanks, Tamara. Is there anything coming from the remote world in terms of inputs, questions, or no, or not? No. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank last speakers for having, again, brought the question of education. I think that's where you're coming in, and also of research. I agree that research, I think that's one of the things that we all agree, that perhaps more research is needed. They're not necessarily easy and one-off solutions. I think it's a conjunction or conjugation of different measures. And at the same time, I would like also to stress that we are still looking for answers. This is still, for many of us, it's a very new thing. And so I can agree and emphasize with Veronica when you say, you know, a campaign is not going to do anything. But at the same time, we also need to start and learn something about it. And that's, of course, I'm defending my own stake, because we're going to present the campaign now. So yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree. We need more research, and I think also perhaps some ways of exchanging practices on what works. This is also an introduction to Maria and the campaign that the Advisory Council on Youth of the Council of Europe has initiated and invited for a campaign against hate speech online. Maria, would you like to introduce us to what that campaign is about and what you expect to get out of it, and how does it relate with some of the issues that we have addressed here? Thank you.
Some technical. So, good morning again. As Rui said, the Advisory Council proposed 2 years ago to the Joint Council on Youth a new project on combating hate speech online. And the main aim of this project was to combat racism and discrimination in its online expression. And we are planning at the moment this big campaign because we want to see how we can equip young people and youth organizations with the necessary competencies to recognize and act against human rights violation. So, as we all saw, the discussion is not an easy one, so at the same time it's not easy to organize an online campaign about this topic. The aims that we have with this campaign at the moment, and we are building it on this, it's to mobilize young people and youth organizations to promote youth rights education and take actions against any kind of violation on human rights. Provide young people online activities provide young online activists and youth organizations with competencies and tools, and contribute to a more democratic governance of internet. Map the differences, the different forms of hate speech that we have, and it was already mentioned today, and see what is the impact that these forms have in young people, and how we can better address them. And then create and train at the same time a network of young bloggers in order to make them able to run a mini campaign online. Yes, we have prepared a small PowerPoint. Okay. Yes, as I said, this campaign is mostly based on human rights education, and there we will focus. It's not a campaign that we want to limit freedom of expression, of course. It's not a campaign that we want it's not a campaign against hatred in general, but it's a campaign on hate speech specifically. And of course, it's not a campaign that we want to blame others. So it's difficult, but it's very important to try to keep these limits while we are running the campaign. As I said, this campaign will be about education on human rights, but at the same time, we want to work on democratic citizenship and media literacy. One of the biggest challenges that we see with this campaign is the legal aspect of it. Legally, hate speech is a crime, but we want to see how we can bring necessary legal measures out of this campaign. The functioning of the campaign, where are you now? That maybe they can follow. Yes, okay, the training courses. So the functioning of the campaign, the Council of Europe will have the political coordinator, but this campaign will be run by young people, and it is for young people. So the young people will have, and youth organizations, of course, will have the ownership of this campaign, of its run. And one of the biggest challenges for us is to see how we can involve in this campaign non-organized youth. The Council of Europe will organize training courses for bloggers. We already did this. We're already working on a campaign strategy, and we are at the moment, we have also a proposal for a logo that maybe you can see it. This is the first proposal for our logo. Hate Me stand for human rights. But it's not adopted yet. We are working on it. It's just the first proposal, and I said. So on the campaign, it will be a central website. It will be a blog with edited content, and of course, direct communication and online presence. The campaign will start in March officially. It will be launched 31st of March, which is the International Day, 21st, I'm sorry, of March, which is the International Day Against Discrimination and Racism. And as you can see, it will work in both levels, European, where we will have the campaign platform, online action tools, all these provided by the Council of Europe. Some ideas are on reporting hate speech and hate speech watch, but at the same time, we will work in a national level. In the national level, we are intending to create national coordinating bodies that will run this campaign. These bodies can be a youth organization that wants to take a lead on this campaign in national level. We want to, through these bodies to also work a lot in education and training in national level. And of course, we will organize conferences in national and European level. More information on the campaign, and I'm running now in the presentation, but I think that during the break, if you want more information, we can share it. You can find in this website, it's www.coe.int/act4HRE, Human Rights Education, the abbreviation on this. We are open in any help and contribution on the running of this campaign. And of course, if there are any questions or comments on the campaign, are more than welcome.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'm sorry for that you had to rush, but I think that you provide a very much to the point introduction to the campaign. We are running against time at the moment. I still would like to perhaps collect any feedback or any idea that you may have from your side about the campaign that has been presented. It is something I should stress that will be mostly online, so it's not a European campaign only. I mean, anyone in the world can connect to it, and that's, I think, one of the challenges that we will have is precisely to integrate experiences from very different sides of the world. I don't know if there will be any comments or any questions to Maria about this. Well, that seems not to be the case. Then I think that this is like an invitation for us to wrap up the workshop. Let me tell you, let me first of all express our thanks to the hosts of the Internet Governance Forum, let me take that, and to our supporters here in this room that have helped us technically to make this work. I'd like to thank very much the panelists, Maria, Nicole and Ala, for having introduced these issues, and I think having allowed us to explore the variety of matters that actually connect with this. And I think the difficulty is that, or the challenge is that it's not so simple. It's the responses are indeed multi-stakeholdered, if you want, but so are the real issues are also very multiple in terms of realities, dimensions, in terms of impact as well, and in terms of understanding, depending on where you are. I think we could probably agree that education is certainly part of it. Education as part of literacy, as part of citizenship. Education also for people who maybe have a more direct role online. And that is something that we also want to address through the campaign. But also the question of research. We need more research and more sharing of maybe what works. And I think that the examples that have been brought here are extremely interesting and could be a starting point to say, well, in some countries we do this and in others it's not possible. Interesting to know why that is the case. Because I think we also need to learn more. There is no question of the online-offline communication. You know, to which extent are they the same? Obviously we could say that they are the same and they're not the same. I don't know if that's a satisfactory conclusion. But at the same time, we need to find the answers together. And the challenge, and that's why we put the emphasis here on young people, and I think Nicole especially brought very, very interesting examples, is that we need to find the answers together with the users, together with the citizens of the internet, and together with young people. It's not answers that we have even in the Council of Europe, we don't have them ready-made because we do not have them to start with, and they only make sense if they are discussed and brought in with the young people. So the campaign, for example, for us, it's also a means for that, to find out more what young people think about these things. And because indeed the research is not so much, I would say. So I don't know if you'd be happy with these preliminary conclusions like this. If you would be happy, I would really very much like to thank you for your participation. I do hope that we can continue discussing and talking, because it's not the end of the story, it's in fact just the beginning. Thank you.